So our last chapter for today is coastal environment. And Fiona Eunson.
Okay, yeah. Phil?
Can I just clarify the process? We've got some PX items for today, too, into the previous minutes. Do they need to be dealt with today? That's what we were seeing.
No, they can be done next Wednesday.
Yeah? Okay.
Okay, thank you. Yes. Okay, please.
Okay,
start. Yeah.
good afternoon. The Coastal Environment chapter, it's a relatively slim chapter that identifies the coastal environment as is more or less directed under the New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement and also in recognition of the direction given in the Canterbury Regional Policy Statement. So we've mapped a coastal environment overlay and we've got objectives and policies that give direction to the interpretation of that coastal environment area. For the most part, this chapter relies on rules in other zones that adjoin the coastal marine area boundary. That's the mean high water springs for Resource Management Act purposes. And also relies, importantly, on district-wide rules in the Natural and Cultural Heritage chapter, particularly the subdivision chapter and also the general rules chapter. There is one discrete coastal zone proposed, which largely represents the operative Conservation 1A coastal margin zone in the Christchurch City Plan. It's been extended slightly to incorporate a couple of other areas where there's a yacht club and also a little bit of coastal margin where there's a little bit of grassed area. But for the most part, this zone covers sandy and rocky beach areas of the Christchurch City area, where historically there's been a fairly intensive, in parts, recreational use of these areas. So we've rolled a lot of those provisions over. We've extended them a little bit to recognise that there's things like park benches and picnic tables, things like that that we've included in the definition of passive recreation activities. There's a provision for management of planting areas and habitat restoration, because a lot of that area is actually covered in exotic vegetation. So we're making provision for the introduction of Indigenous species where that's appropriate. We've also been working on coastal hazards, but as I've signalled in earlier presentations, we're proposing that they go in the natural hazards chapter as part of the stage 2. So we've commissioned research that's still being developed and it'll be finalised within the next month, and you'll see that when we present the stage 2 natural hazards chapter. We're also making provision in another chapter for coastal hazard mitigation works. There's no actual provision for coastal revetments and coastal protection works, which support a lot of the roading and other structures around the district's coastline. So we're proposing those be included in the general rules chapter. Now, coming to the resolutions, effectively they're little tidy-ups and editing issues that we didn't quite get through, and one of them was, which has just been resolved in the last week, has been a new map of scheduled batches and to be acknowledged and those to be removed. So there's been a working party of councillors that's been working with my colleague Sarah Oliver, who's been working on that particular part of this chapter as part of her work on the residential batches zone. So some of you will be familiar with that. So that map, that proposing to include an updated map, is included there, and the justification for the scheduled batches and those to be removed will still sit in the residential chapters, section 32. The second resolution is about the proposed inline map showing the coastal environment overlay. We'd want to make this actually more schematic. The reason for including this map is so that people can look at that just as they do with the mapping in the natural hazards chapter, for example, where we've identified where the liquefaction assessment 1 and 2 area is. People can have a quick look here and get a general indication of where the coastal environment overlay is located. We don't need the inset maps, we don't need identification of the zonings, we just need a general outline with the coastal environment line demarcated. The next resolution, Resolution 3, is just to update some of the zoning errors that we found. There's a couple of areas that where the coastal zone is extended a bit, and now it's actually been replaced by transport zone, a little bit of an kind of an area just to the east of the McCormick's Bay Causeway, and a little bit of land near Whitewash Head that are actually included in the transport zone rather than the conservation zone. The last resolution is probably the most significant, because we've made an error here, and instead of zoning land coastal, we've included it in the transport zone. And that's come about because a lot of the margins around the coastline are actually unformed legal road, and this is another editing issue. So the area that I've hatched that kind of looks like a rabbit's leg and the kneecap, they should be included in the coastal zone. The other key aspect is that the coastal zone, rather than being the red polka dots as shown on the in part of the caption at Resolution 4, should all be blue as it was in the original briefing. We've done a wee bit of a switching back and forth, wondering whether the coastal chapter should be notified at the same time as the natural and cultural heritage chapter, so that's why that little editing issue has come about, but we'd prefer that it went now, was rezoned as in the blue for coastal with the sea, and effectively that again would represent the same areas that you're seeing in that Resolution 3, which is pretty much the coastline along the Christchurch city urban area. Thank you.
Questions for Andrew? Phil?
Referring to the scheduled batches and batches to be removed, there's no mention in this section of the batches at Murray Gardens.
No.
Should there be? Or in as much as we didn't know that they were there, are we just taking the attitude that we don't mention them because we didn't know they were there?
Effectively, they haven't been through any of this process previously, as you're aware, and I became aware because of my involvement with the Natural Hazards chapter, that the council become aware of them post the earthquakes. Again, they're illegally established. They're all sitting right at the base of the cliff, right at the top of the tide line. We think it's probably pertinent not to acknowledge them effectively at this stage.
Okay, great. Yeah, now as long as it's not an oversight, that's fine.
Oh, no,
and then
purposeful.
I have another question. I don't know whether this is correctly placed or not, because it's not a planning question, but it certainly is a consideration. Mm-hmm. This information, in as much as we're in open meeting and this agenda is an open agenda, is in the public arena. Mm-hmm. This is potentially the first time that the owners of those batches at Taylor's Mistake, Boulder Bay and so on will have the opportunity to know the outcome of the working party's discussions. Is there going to be any engagement with the people that are affected by this? I mean, I know we've been told that we shouldn't be having any direct involvement with either side of the debate on the batches, but in as much as there's now information which is in the public arena, which will be of grave concern to the people that are affected by this, and there have been public meetings facilitated by Peter Mitchell that these batch owners have been invited to, I think it would be reasonable if we were to engage with them in some way and give them a heads up that this is where, not even so much that this is where this is going, but in draft form, this is where this has gone.
Councillor Turner, yes, just to answer that question, as you'll all be aware, we're starting an awareness campaign post the 2nd of March when all of these chapters have gone to the ministers to inform people of what is actually in the draft chapters and the implications of that. And the reason for having that post the chapters have gone to the ministers is so that it can't be construed as public consultation, because we all know that this has been contracted, the time frame for these stage 2 chapters, but yes, the intention is to, through the media and through specific meetings with groups, we will be having those awareness, that awareness continued.
And I mean, that really sums up my point. I'm assuming that this is a group where there'll be a specific engagement, because I wouldn't want them to find out what was happening just through the media.
No, it wouldn't be specific engagement. No, it would not be classed as consultation. The whole purpose of this is to encourage people to make submissions. The hearing panel is the panel making decisions. So the way to interact with this plan is through submissions.
Okay, Phil?
Yeah, I guess just following on from that, maybe because of the contentious nature of this part though, there should be at least a special comms plan around it, that part.
No, there is. The awareness campaign is the opportunity for the council to go to, in the form of officers, to go to various parties and to have through the media a complete program to make people aware of what is in the draft chapters and to encourage them to submit if they have any concerns.
Okay, well, I'll just see what other councillors and people think too from a...
We cannot have a different process for one group of people versus another group of people. That's the quickest way to a judiciary review of this whole process.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to ask you about the unformed legal roads, paper roads like. Are they, is there enough sort of provision to, within this chapter to prevent four-wheel drive, say, riding along at beaches within the Christchurch area?
That sort of thing council has dealt with through various bylaws. There's 2 bylaws, I can't quote them, but we did check that out because that issue was raised through some of the consultation that we had with some of the community board members, particularly out in the Banks Peninsula area. So there are 2 bylaws, and some of one of our in-house policy analysts is aware of that sort of issue. So
Thank you.
Yep.
My other question really is around our marine reserves, which we have one around the peninsula. So where does that fit into this chapter?
Well, I've got no specific knowledge of that, but effectively that will be in that area that's beyond the council's jurisdiction, I would think, which is sort of seaward of the mean high water springs or the coastal marine area boundary.
Right. So that would be ECAN's responsibility. Anything below mean high water mark, so mean high water mark on the beach towards the ocean is the responsibility of ECAN, up to, I think it's 12 kilometres out to sea.
There's 12 mile zone, but yeah, great. Okay, thank you.
Excuse me, I also expect that the Department of Conservation has some responsibility in that area as well.
Yeah, because like the objectives clearly pertain to around the ecosystem being wider than just even that limit. But thank you for that.
Are there any more questions? No, Andrew, are you happy to move the staff, the proposal? Yeah. Recommendation, okay. Paul, like to second? Okay, Andrew move and Paul second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Against? Carry. Next item.
Thank you.